If your Chevy truck stalls, watch this video. I'm gonna show you my most common parts that fail that cause these Vortec V8 engines to stall while you're driving them. And of course, as always, you can trust me, I'm a mechanic. All right, so on these trucks, you got the throttle body. It's right up here under this cover. All right, so we have a throttle body right here. Now this is a drive-by-wire throttle body. They also make a drive-by-cable one, which is on the older models. So drive-by-cable is 1999 to 2002. And then drive-by-wire, which is like a switch in the gas pedal, is from 2003 to 2007. So these get all carboned up, and they get all this black soot in there. Now that's probably not gonna make it stall. It's just gonna make it run less efficiently, you know, stumble, hesitation, that kind of thing. If it's bad enough, I guess it could stall. The drive-by-wire ones, they got this little motor in there. It gums that up, and it makes it so that it could possibly stall. But I think the stalling would come on a drive-by cable, the older one, because it has all these other sensors attached to it. So if you've got a carboned up throttle body like this, obviously get in there, clean it up, get all that black soot out of there. It's not helping you. And then that should eliminate this as one of the sources of your stalling. So you will notice it's got all this gunk in here, this carbon, it's black. You got to get in there with some throttle body cleaner and clean it out. They say you're not supposed to do this and move this because it messes up the motor calibration if you move the butterfly in here, the throttle plate. But, you know, it kind of relearns. I hadn't really had a problem. You can see all the carbon in there. Get it cleaned up. You got to get in here, take it off, clean it up, put it back on. Should be good to go. Then, of course, on a drive-by cable throttle body, you have the idle air control valve up in here. Here it is right here. You know, that gets carboned up, gunked up too. Really bad on these ones. You got to clean them out. If that thing isn't moving properly, it definitely will stall and stumble and not run properly at all. So the throttle body, you know, it gets carboned up. It gets all that black gunk in there and all the soot in there. And guys are like, oh, I just cleaned it. It stopped stalling. Well, you know, it just doesn't breathe as well with it all carboned up like that. It can't work as efficiently. But if it's just randomly stalling, I highly doubt that's it. You know, it's not going to hurt to clean it. That's more of a like it can't breathe. You know, it's kind of stumbling and stalling like that. But if it just cuts out, it's either probably electrical or a bad sensor. But you're going to want to get in there and make sure the throttle body is clean anyways. Then on the driver's side of the engine right here, you have your coolant temperature sensor right down in there. So here it is right here. Just screws into the side of the block. Very easy to swap out, very easy to locate. But you got to know if it's bad. If it's bad, you can get in there, get you a new one, swap it out. All right, here's the coolant temperature sensor right here. This tiny little sensor just screws in the engine and detects the temperature of the coolant. It uses this to reference how hot the engine is and say, okay, we need to add more fuel into the mix or not. These go bad. When they go bad, you'll never know. No one ever thinks of it being bad, but you just got to swap it out and get a new one. You don't have to recalibrate it or anything like that. I had a really bad experience with one of these trucks once. It kept stalling and stalling and stalling. Turns out it was the coolant temperature sensor. It would think that it was like, you know, 86 degrees below zero or something like that, and the engine would just cut out. So that coolant temperature sensor is really important. If you unplug it with the truck running, it'll just stall. It's that important. It doesn't just monitor the coolant temperature, it also monitors a bunch of stuff to help the computer gauge how much fuel it needs to add to the engine to keep it running properly, depending on how hot the engine is. Then down in here, right down in there, we have the crankshaft position sensor, and that is where it's located. To get down in there, you got to get it from the underside, get up under there, take the starter out of the way, and get it swapped out. So then you have the crankshaft position sensor. Now when these go bad, it'll just cut out. Driving on the highway, it'll just stall. Going full speed, you know, 70 miles an hour, it'll just stall. So it's just as bad on the 4.8 and the 5.3 as it is the 8.1. They have a known issue where their crankshaft position sensor really goes bad and you got to swap it out. It's not as common on the 4.8 and the 5.3, although it does happen. So when you swap this out, you got to get an OEM, Delphi, or GM genuine part, and you have to do a crankshaft variation relearn procedure. Here's the crankshaft position sensor right here. So when these go bad, number one culprit for it just dropping out highway speed, 70 miles an hour, just cuts out and stalls on the side of the highway. This is where I go first. You know, these aren't that fun to replace, but they're not that bad. You gotta get the starter out of the way, and then you just swap it out and get a new one, but you have to do crankshaft variation relearn procedure. So you got to get the Delphi one or a GM genuine one, because you don't want an inexpensive one of these. You want to do it right the first time. The cheaper ones cause problems. The 8.1 Vortec V8s are notoriously bad for these going bad. What this is this a little sensor on here. You have the reluctor wheel in the engine. It spins around, and as it passes, this sensor generates a signal that looks just like this, like a sawtooth, and it's spread out. The faster the engine's spinning, closes up the gap between the signal, and it lets the computer know where the crankshaft is in its rotation, uses that for a bunch of calculations. So if this is bad, the truck will stall all the time. Truck stalling, this is the number one culprit. So here's the sensor right here. The reluctor wheel just passes by this. It doesn't rub it. When it passes by, it generates that signal. So your reluctor wheel can be loose, have a chipped tooth. If it does, you got serious problems. You can't just fix that by swapping out this sensor, but that's rare. Now your mass airflow sensor can cause some stalling too, but you know, if this thing isn't clean, you know, if it's really dirty, I mean, it can cause stumbling, stalling, poor performance, but this is an extreme case we're talking about here. If it just cuts out and stalls, probably not this. It can be. You want to make sure your mass airflow sensor is clean too. Get some mass airflow sensor cleaner, get it cleaned up. All right, so here's an old mass airflow sensor off of this truck. So these get dirty, they stop reading right. This meters the amount of airflow in grams that flow past it, tells the computer, look, this much air is going past, mix this much fuel in to make the engine run right. If this thing's dirty, computer doesn't know how much fuel to add to the air mixture, won't run right. So you gotta clean it sometimes. Sometimes you gotta replace them, but normally you can just clean them. All right, so here's the sensor right here, and that's just a honeycomb right there. That's not the actual sensor. The actual sensor is in here. So we have a sensor down in there, right up there, and right there. There's little things going across are the sensors. And now, you know, I know it's not that simple sometimes. Don't forget about the combos. You know, you can have a combination of any one of these parts go bad. You can have fuel problems. You can have misfires. You can have bad spark plugs. You name it, you can have a combination of all these things which will cause it to stall. But if it's just dropping out while you're driving, it's probably just one of these sensors. All right, that's it for the video. And those are the things you want to check if your Chevy Vortec V8 engine is stalling randomly, or, you know, stalling all the time, leaving you stranded. I'd check these three things first before I did anything else to try to fix the problem. Check out the next one. Don't forget to drop me a huge thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe down below for more Chevy tips and tricks in the future. Check y'all in the next one. Later.